What if the soul could never be shackled, even when the body was bound in chains? What if the cries of children born into slavery echoed not just through the fields of cotton, but through eternity itself, asking questions no master could ever silence? My friends watching today, before we begin, make sure you subscribe, because this story is not just a tale of the past. It is a testimony of the human spirit that still demands to be remembered. The year is 1842. Deep in the American South, in the blistering heat of Louisiana's cane plantations, the earth is cracked with drought in some patches and drowned in swamp in others. But always alive with labor men, women, and even children bent beneath the weight of a life they did not choose. At the heart of this story stands one boy. Though calling him a boy hardly captures the man's burdens he was forced to carry. His name was Josiah. 17 years old, born on the Magnolia Bend plantation that stretched along the banks of the Mississippi. He had never once set foot off its soil. The boundaries of his world were drawn by the river, the cane rose, and the white-pillared house where the master's family lived. Josiah's skin was dark like polished walnut, his frame lean and wiry, but his eyes, those sharp, alert eyes, carried a light no lash could fully dim. Josiah had a gift. Where others saw only cane and cotton, he saw rhythm. He could hear the patterns of the work songs, could sense the timing of footsteps, the shift of wind through the stalks. His hands, though scarred, were deft. He could weave cane leaves into tight braids, repair a cracked basket with a touch, or carve little flutes out of river reeds for the younger children. He did these things quietly, cautiously, because on Magnolia Bend, joy was often punished. His mother Amara was taken from him when he was only 8, sold to another plantation farther west. That sale was his first lesson in loss, the first shattering crack in his world. His father he never knew. Some whispered his father had been a field hand who died in the swamps. Others whispered darker stories of bloodlines mixed against their will. But Josiah held on to Amara's memory like a talisman. She used to hum to him at night, songs her own mother carried from the shores of Africa. He could still hear her voice in the dark, the melody wrapping around him when the whip cracked in daylight. The overseer of Magnolia Bend was a man named Jonas Peek-a-Broad, a red-faced brute whose cruelty was matched only by his suspicion.
Jonas
Believed Josiah thought too much, asked too many questions, stared too long at the horizon. For in Josiah's silence, Jonas sensed rebellion. Suspicion on a plantation was as dangerous as fire in dry cane. The children on Magnolia Bend rarely lived to dream beyond childhood. Many did not see 10 summers. Disease, hunger, and exhaustion took them. Those who survived were soon pressed into labor, their small hands nimble enough to weed cane rows or pick insects from cotton buds. They were born into captivity there, first cries mingling with the lowing of oxen and the clatter of iron chains.
Ah!
Josiah often watched them and wondered, did they even know the word freedom? Did they feel its absence like an ache, or was it simply a ghost they had never met? One day, as the sun burned high over the cane fields, a defining event struck Josiah's life like a thunderbolt. A little girl named Lila, no more than 10, collapsed in the rows. She was one of the plantation children, fragile, thin, her hands too small for the knife she was forced to carry. She fell face first into the dirt, her body trembling with fever. Jonas Pike saw it. Jonas, true to his nature, drew his whip instead of mercy. Josiah moved before he even thought. His body leaped forward, instincts stronger than fear. He shielded Lila with his own frame, taking the lash across his back. The crack split the air. Fire exploded through his skin. He did not cry out. His jaw locked, his muscles stiffened, but his silence was a roar louder than any scream. Jonas struck again, furious that a slave boy dared defy him. This time Josiah caught the whip in his hands. Blood ran down his palms, but his eyes never broke from the overseer's. For a heartbeat, the entire field froze. The cane workers stopped. The children stared. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. In that moment, Josiah understood something. Pain could be endured. But dignity could not be taken, not if he chose to guard it. That night, as he lay on his straw mat in the quarters, his back raw and bleeding, Josiah thought of his mother's words, "One day, my child, the river will carry you beyond these fields. Listen to it. It always whispers the way." He realized he could no longer simply survive. He would have to choose, remain bound in silence, or risk everything to seek a freedom he had never seen but always believed in. And so began the journey, not of a man alone, but of a people bound together, children and elders alike, carrying dreams too heavy for chains to break. The night after Josiah shielded little Lila, the air in the slave quarters was heavier than usual. The cabins, rough-hewn and drafty, sat in two crooked rows behind the big house. The smell of sweat, smoke, and sickness lingered, but beneath it all lay something else, a pulse of quiet awe. Word of Josiah's defiance spread as fast as the river's current. Children whispered it under their breaths. Women repeated it in the cadence of their work songs. Even the old men, bent from decades of labor, nodded slowly in recognition. They had seen whippings 100 times over, but to see a boy no more than 17 catch the lash in his bare hands, that was something altogether different. Josiah did not feel heroic. His back burned with every breath, and his palms were cracked and swollen where the leather bit through. Yet in the silence of the cabin, he found himself humming his mother's song. It slipped past his lips like a secret promise. Lila lay on a mat beside him, her fever breaking, her small chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm. She opened her eyes just once and whispered, "You stopped him." Josiah touched her forehead with his rough hand. "Rest now. Tomorrow, we rise again." The following morning, Overseer Jonas Pike prowled the fields like a hound sniffing for weakness. His pride had been wounded in front of dozens of eyes, and a wounded man like Jonas was far more dangerous than a whip in motion. He barked orders twice as loud, pushed the workers twice as hard. His eyes kept darting toward Josiah. He wanted the boy to stumble, to give him reason to unleash his fury. But Josiah did not stumble. His movements were steady, his blade slicing. Cane stalks in smooth rhythm. His back screamed with pain, but his face revealed nothing. Each time Jonas rode past on his horse, Josiah met his gaze without flinching. That silent defiance was sharper than any blade. At midday, Josiah slipped away to the edge of the river, under the pretense of fetching water. The Mississippi rolled wide and endless before him, its surface glinting like molten copper under the sun. He knelt, letting the current wash over his raw hands. His reflection wavered in the water, a ghostly image of a boy already half a man. He thought of his mother's words again. "The river whispers the way." "Josiah," a voice murmured behind him. He turned to see old Ben, one of the eldest slaves on the plantation. His beard was white, his back bent like a bow, but his eyes still held fire. Ben had been born in Africa, stolen across the ocean as a child. He was a living relic of a world most here had only heard of in fragments. "You done something yesterday?" Ben said softly. "You lit a spark, boy. Sparks catch fast in dry cane." Josiah lowered his head. "I only tried to protect Lila." Ben shook his head slowly. "No, you did more. You showed them he ain't invincible. Overseer bleeds like any man. Fear keeps folk bowed down. But you," he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper, "you reminded us we still men." Josiah felt the weight of those words. Still men. On Magnolia Bend, everything was done to strip them of that truth. But one act of resistance had brought it back into the air, if only faintly. That night, in the quarters, Josiah overheard hushed talk. Some spoke of escape. Others warned against it. "The swamps'll swallow you before freedom does," one woman said, rocking her baby. "The dogs'll catch you, and they don't bring folk back alive." Still, the talk was there. Talk was dangerous enough. If word reached Jonas that the slaves were whispering about freedom, he would unleash hell. Days passed, and Josiah's back began to heal into scars-raised ridges that told a story without words. Jonas continued to watch. Him, eyes narrowed. Then, one evening, fate turned again. The master of Magnolia Bend, Charles Whitfield, returned from New Orleans. He was a man of wealth and self-importance, with a belly grown round from port wine and sugar profits. His wife Margaret wore silks imported from Europe. Their presence in the big house always meant new displays of power. Josiah was among those, ordered to the yard to unload crates from the wagon. As he lifted a heavy barrel, he caught fragments of the master's conversation with Jonas. "Prices are strong in the New Orleans market," Whitfield was saying. "The girl Amara fetched a fair sum last time. You may thin out the stock again before winter." The words struck Josiah like a hammer. His mother's name Amara. He froze, the barrel pressing into his shoulder. Could it be true? She had been sold years ago, but the way Whitfield spoke, it sounded recent, as if she had been traded more than once. His chest tightened. Was she still alive, somewhere beyond the river? That night, Josiah lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of the cabin. If his mother lived, he had to find her. That desire burned hotter than even the dream of freedom itself. Escape had always been a whisper, but now it was a call of command echoing in his bones. Yet he knew the risk. The swamps were treacherous, filled with snakes, mosquitoes, and water that could swallow a man whole. Patrols hunted runaways with hounds trained to track blood. Few who fled ever made it north. But Josiah was not thinking only of himself anymore. Lila, the other children, old Ben, all those whose chains clinked through the night, they carried stories that deserved more than to be buried in the cane fields. If freedom was to be sought, it must be sought for all. The decision pressed down on him like the Mississippi's weight, and somewhere in the distance, he thought he heard it the river whispering, urging him forward. The cicadas sang through the night, a high-pitched chorus that wove itself through the humid air of Magnolia Bend. Josiah lay restless on his mat, listening not to their song but to the whispers moving among the cabins like smoke. The word freedom had returned quiet and dangerous, slipping from tongue to tongue. Old Ben sat near the fire pit, his face shadowed by the flickering flames. He carved a piece of wood with his knife, the shavings gathering at his feet. Josiah sat beside him, waiting. Ben did not speak until the last sliver of wood fell. "You thinking about running?" Ben said at last, his voice low. Josiah did not deny it. "I heard Master Whitfield mention my mother's name. She lives. I must find her." Ben's knife stilled. He looked at the boy with eyes that carried oceans of memory. "The river carries many stories, Josiah, but it don't carry them all the way to shore. You step in, you best be ready not to come back." Josiah clenched his fists, the scars across his palms tightening. "I can't stay here. Every day I stay, they take more of us. The children, they don't even know what they've lost. Someone has to try." For a long moment, Ben studied him. Then he leaned closer, his voice barely a whisper. "There's an old path through the cypress swamps. My granddaddy spoke of it, said it was used by runaways in the time before. Most never dared it too thick with snakes and fever. But if you know how to listen to the land, it might guide you." Josiah's heart beat faster. "You know the way?" Ben shook his head slowly. "I'm too old, boy, but you've got the eyes for it. You see rhythm where others see chaos. The swamps are like that. Music in the silence. You follow it right, it might lead you north." The conversation ended when footsteps approached. Jonas Pike's shadow stretched across the firelight. Eyes, small and mean, scanned the men. "What you whispering about?" he barked. No one spoke. Josiah kept his gaze on the fire, forcing his breath to stay steady. Jonas stepped closer, his whip dangling from his belt. "I don't like secrets." He leaned down toward Josiah. "And I sure don't like the way you look at me." "Something you want to say, boy?" Josiah's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Silence was both shield and sword. Jonas spat in the dirt and stalked off. The tension eased only after his footsteps faded. That night, Josiah dreamt of the river. Again, he saw it stretching endlessly, its waters glinting silver under moonlight. On the far bank stood a woman, his mother, her arms outstretched. But when he stepped forward, the ground turned to mud, sucking him down, the dog's howls rising. From the darkness, he woke with his heart pounding, sweat dripping down his brow. The days that followed brought new cruelty. Lila, still frail from her fever, was ordered back into the fields. Josiah worked close to her, quietly easing her load, shielding her from Jonas's eyes when he could. The overseer's suspicion never waned, and Josiah felt the man's gaze, like a thorn at his back. One evening, as he carried water buckets from the well, Josiah stumbled upon a conversation near the stables. Two field hands, brothers named Elijah and Thomas, were speaking in hushed tones. "North, by way of the river boats," Elijah said. "They say conductors wait along the line." "Dangerous talk," Thomas muttered. "Augzeld Terrace." Apart before we reached the river, Josiah stepped closer. "Tell me what you know." The brothers exchanged wary glances. Finally, Elijah spoke. "There's a man in New Orleans, a free black carpenter. They call him Gabriel. Rumor is, he helps runaways, sends them a priver, hides them on the boats." Josiah felt the spark catch flame inside him. New Orleans lay less than 50 miles south. If he could reach Gabriel, perhaps there was a way not just to find his mother, but to lead others out. But danger struck sooner than he expected. The very next day, Jonas called Josiah out in front of the field hands. "You," Jonas growled, pointing. "Master says you'll be working the stables now. Too many eyes on you in the cane." Josiah's heart sank. He knew what this meant. Jonas wanted him isolated, away from the others, easier to control. That night, as Josiah mucked out the stalls, Jonas appeared in the doorway, whip coiled in his hand. "You think you special, boy?" he sneered. "Think you some hero? One crack of this whip and I'll remind you what you are." Josiah stood tall, the stink of hay and horse sweat filling his nose. His body trembled with fury, but he said, "Nothing." Silence again. It enraged Jonas more than words ever could. But before the whip fell, a sound cut through the night, the sharp cry of a child. Jonas cursed, turning his head toward the cabins. Josiah's chance passed in an instant, but the moment lodged deep inside him. He would not wait much longer. That night he whispered to old Ben, Elijah, Thomas. The plan was simple in its danger. When the next storm came, when thunder drowned the dogs' howls and the rain washed tracks from the mud, they would slip away toward the cypress swamps. From there, the river would guide them south to New Orleans. To Gabriel, to possibility. The river whispered. The night waited. The children of Magnolia Bend, for the first time in their short lives, dreamed of more than chains. The storm came sooner than anyone expected. By dusk, the sky had bruised into a deep violet, and the air pressed heavy against the skin like wet cloth. Thunder rolled across the fields, and the first sheets of rain hissed against the cane. Magnolia Bend fell into chaos, animals crying in their pens, the Whitfield family locking shutters, slaves scrambling to cover tools and keep fires from dying. Josiah knew this was the moment. Nature itself was offering a veil. He caught hold. Ben's eyes, in the dimming light. The old man gave the smallest nod. Lila clutched Josiah's hand, trembling. Elijah and Thomas moved close behind, their faces set with grim resolve. They had no maps, no provisions beyond scraps of bread, no weapons but their own will. All they had was the rhythm of the river and the whisper of a path through the swamp. When night fell fully, the rain drowned out the clink of chains and the bark of dogs. They slipped from the cabins, shadows within shadows, hearts hammering louder than the storm itself. Josiah carried Lila on his back when the mud grew too thick for her small legs. The swamp swallowed them, the cypress trees looming, like ancient sentinels. Water rose to their knees, then their waists. Mosquitoes bit at their skin, unseen snakes slid beneath the surface. Every step was a battle. Old Ben led with uncanny memory. "Feel the roots," he whispered. "Cypress don't lie, they point." North, for hours they trudged through black water and tangled vines. Lightning split the sky, revealing faces streaked with mud, eyes burning with fear and determination. The storm masked their trail, but Josiah knew it also hid dangers. A wrong turn could sink them in quickmud. Sudden cry could bring hounds. By midnight, exhaustion weighed heavy. They collapsed on a dry patch of ground, little more than a mound, of earth rising above the water. Josiah held Lila close, her frail body shivering. He thought of his mother, somewhere beyond this swamp, and let that thought steady him. But fate is rarely merciful. As the storm eased toward dawn, a new sound cut through the wet silence, the deep, distant baying of hounds. Josiah's blood froze. The patrols had come. "Move!" Elijah hissed. "They tracking us." They stumbled forward, branches tearing at their clothes, water sucking at their legs. The dogs grew louder, their howls slicing through the swamp like knives. Air surged, like fire through the group, and then it happened. Thomas, the younger of the two brothers, stumbled on a root and fell with a splash. Before Josiah could reach him, a cry rang out, not Thomas's, but a voice from the shadows. "Over here." The words were like a thunderclap. Betrayal, lanterns flared. White men with muskets crashed through the brush, dogs straining at their leashes. At their head rode Jonas Pike, his face twisted in triumph. He cracked his whip in the air, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Thought you could run," he bellowed. "Ain't no swamp deep enough, boy." Chaos erupted. Dogs lunged, snapping at ankles. Elijah swung a branch, striking one aside, but a musket fired, and he cried out, falling into the water. Lila screamed. Josiah grabbed her, pulling her against his chest as Jonas bore down on them. Old Ben, moving with the strength of memory rather than muscle, hurled his knife at Jonas. It missed by inches, embedding in a tree. Jonas roared, spurring his horse. Forward, his whip lashed out, catching Ben across the shoulder. The old man crumpled, blood mixing with the rain-soaked mud. "Run, boy," Ben croaked, his voice a ragged command. "Take her run." Josiah obeyed. Clutching Lila, he plunged deeper into the swamp, branches clawing at his face, mud sucking at his legs. Behind him, the hounds howled, Jonas cursed, and gunshots split the dawn. The world narrowed to one truth: move or die. For hours, or perhaps only moments that felt like eternity, they fled. When the noise finally dimmed, when the dogs' cries faded into the distance, Josiah collapsed on a bank of reeds. His chest heaved, his arms trembling as he held Lila. Elijah was gone. Thomas, betrayer or broken, was gone. Old Ben lay behind in the swamp, his fate sealed. Only Josiah and Lila remained. Lila's small hand clung to his shirt. With terror, searched his... "We can't go back," she whispered. Josiah stroked her damp hair, his own tears lost in the rain. "No," he said, "we won't." In the distance, the Mississippi whispered again, steady and relentless. Freedom had not vanished, but its path was now soaked in blood and shadow. Josiah knew the cost. He also knew he would not turn back. The swamp spit them out onto the river's edge, just as the sun clawed its way over the horizon. The storm had passed, but its fury lingered in broken branches, flooded pools, and a silence that felt almost holy. Josiah and Lila lay in the reeds, their bodies caked in mud, their lungs aching for breath. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the Mississippi, wide and merciless, sliding past as though it had seen all this before. Perhaps it had. Perhaps the river carried every scream, every prayer, every whispered name of those who dared its waters and never returned. Lila shivered against Josiah's chest. Her dress was torn, her feet raw. Josiah tightened his arm around her, whispering the same words his mother once told him. "The river will carry us. Listen close, and it will tell us where to go." He knew they could not linger. Patrols would comb the swamps. Jonas Pike would not rest until he had Josiah broken at his feet. Already, the overseer's face haunted Josiah's mind, twisted in triumph when old Ben fell. Rage swelled inside him, but he pushed it down. Survival came first. Revenge would wait. They followed the river south, moving in the cover of trees. Hunger gnawed quickly. They ate what they could find: wild berries, roots Josiah half recognized, fish caught clumsily with sharpened sticks. Each night they huddled close, the darkness alive with insects, owls, the distant bay of dogs. On the third day, Lila's strength waned. She stumbled often, her lips cracked and dry. Josiah lifted her onto his back again, though his own body screamed with exhaustion. He would not let her fall. He had already lost too much. By the fourth day, the smell of smoke drifted on the air, not the acrid smoke of burning cane, but the sweet temps of cooking fires. Josiah's heart quickened. Settlements lay ahead. Danger, yes, but also hoped at a dusk. They crept toward the edge of a small clearing. What they saw made Josiah freeze. A group of men and women sat around a fire. They were not white. Their skin was dark, but not enslaved. Free blacks, perhaps? Some wore rough work clothes, others coats too fine for field labor. Among them were 2 white men as well, but their manner was different, not masters, not patrols. They spoke in low tones, their eyes scanning the woods. Josiah crouched low, holding Lila close. His instincts screamed caution, but then he heard a word, half lost in the crackle of fire: conductor. He had heard Elijah speak of such men, conductors, people who guided runaways along hidden routes north. Could it be true? He could decide. One of the men turned sharply toward the brush. "Come out," he said firmly. "We know you're there." Josiah's heart slammed. He could run. He could vanish back into the swamp. Lila was weak, her body near collapse. He had no choice. Slowly, he stepped into the clearing. Gasps rose around the fire. A woman hurried forward, her hands gentle but urgent. "Child, she's burning with fever." She touched Lila's forehead, clucking her tongue. "She won't last another night out there." Josiah held her back. "Who are you?" His voice was hoarse, but steady. The man who had spoken earlier stepped closer. He was tall, his face lined with years, but softened by kindness. "Name's Gabriel," he said. "Carpenter from New Orleans. And if you're runaways, you found the right folk." The name struck Josiah like a bell. Gabriel. The one Elijah had whispered of. He nearly fell to his knees in relief. That night, for the first time in days, Josiah and Lila ate real food: cornbread, beans, salted pork. They sat by the fire as Gabriel listened to their story. He did not interrupt, only nodded, his eyes dark with understanding. When Josiah spoke of his mother, Amara, Gabriel placed a hand on his shoulder. "I've heard that name," he said softly. "A woman sold through the New Orleans market years back. Strong woman, carried songs from the old country. I don't know where she is now, but I know she fought to keep her spirit." Josiah's throat tightened. The hope that his mother still lived burned brighter than ever. Gabriel leaned closer. "Listen, boy. North of here lies a line: safe houses. Allies, folk who will risk their lives to get you through. But the journey is long, and the patrols are merciless. If you want it, I'll guide you to the start." Josiah's eyes met his. "It's not just for me, for her too." He pulled Lila close. Gabriel's gaze softened. "Then we moved together." But not all was safety. At the edge of the firelight, a shadow lingered: one of the white men, his face half hidden, eyes narrow as he watched Josiah. Trust was a fragile thing, and in this world, betrayal often wore a friendly smile. The river whispered still, but its voice was no longer alone. Now it was joined by others' voices of allies, voices of danger. Josiah knew the path ahead would test every ounce of his strength. But he also knew this: he was no longer running blindly. He was walking toward something. Gabriel's camp broke before dawn. The fire was smothered, the supplies packed into worn satchels. Josiah woke to the sound of footsteps and hushed voices. For the first time in his life, he had slept on open ground without fear of the overseers. Whip waking him, but freedom carried a different kind of weight, the knowledge that danger now lurked everywhere, not just in the fields. Lila was pale but breathing easier after food and rest. Gabriel's wife, Miriam, had wrapped her in a shawl and whispered prayers over her through the night. Josiah watched the girl stir awake, her lips cracked, but smiling faintly.
Ow!
That small smile lit something fierce in him. If he could keep her alive, perhaps he could keep alive every child's chance at freedom. The group moved north at first light, following deer paths through the thick underbrush. Gabriel carried himself like a man who knew every tree, every hollow, every bend of the river. The land speaks, he murmured once, and if you listen close, it hides you. The others followed with practiced silence. But Josiah felt the eyes of the white stranger on him still, the narrow-faced man who had said little the night before. His name was Harlan. Gabriel had introduced him as a sympathizer, a man of conscience, but Josiah's gut told him something was wrong. Harlan's gaze lingered too long, and his smile never reached his eyes. By midday, the group reached a small cabin hidden among the pines. The shutters were closed, but when Gabriel knocked 3 times, the door creaked open. An elderly woman stood there, her back stooped, but her eyes sharp. "Safe house," Gabriel said softly. The woman ushered them in quickly, bolting the door. Inside, the smell of dried herbs and smoke filled the air. She laid Lila down on a cot, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead. "She mend," the woman said. "Rest here a day, maybe 2. For Josiah, the respite was both relief and torment. His body longed for rest, but his mind churned. Each hour they lingered was another hour Jonas Pike could close the distance. He could picture the overseer even now, riding hard with dogs straining at their leashes. The thought made his scars burn fresh. That evening, Gabriel sat with Josiah by the hearth. "You got the look of a leader," he said quietly. "That's dangerous for you, but it's also salvation for others. Folk follow men who hold their heads high." Josiah lowered his gaze. "I didn't ask to lead. No one ever does," Gabriel replied. "But when the lash falls and you still stand, others notice." Josiah thought of the cane fields, of how the children's eyes had fixed on him. When he caught the whip in his hands, the memory weighed heavy. Could he carry not only himself, but others? Did he dare? Night fell thick and quiet. Josiah dozed lightly near Lila's cot, but woke when the floor creaked. He opened his eyes to see Harlan slipping toward the door. Josiah rose silently, following into the night. Harlan moved quick, glancing over his shoulder, then disappearing. Into the trees, Josiah's pulse thundered. He crept after him until voices drifted on the breeze. 2 runaways, Harlan whispered, a boy and a girl, heading north with a black carpenter named Gabriel. They're holed up in the pine cabin. Josiah's stomach dropped. Betrayal. Through the branches, he saw them. 2 white men on horseback, patrolmen with rifles across their saddles, one-handed. Harlan a pouch that clinked with silver. Josiah's fists clenched. His first instinct was to rush forward, but he forced himself still. Rage could kill faster than a bullet. Instead, he waited until Harlan turned back toward the cabin. When the man slipped inside again, Josiah was already waiting in the shadows. He caught Harlan by the collar, slamming him against the wall so hard the boards groaned. "You sold us," Josiah hissed. His voice low and trembling with fury. Harlan sneered, even pinned. "Better your hide than mine. You think you can outrun? Dogs and guns? Boy, you'll all end up hanging. Might as well earn a little silver before the noose." Josiah's hand tightened on Harlan's throat. For a moment, he saw Jonas Pike's face there, the overseer's grin, the whip's crack. The temptation to end Harlan then and there surged hot and sharp, but then Lila's weak voice drifted from the cot. "Josiah?" The sound pulled him back. He released Harlan, letting the man crumple to the floor. "If you breathe a word of this to Gabriel," Josiah said, voice cold, "I'll finish what I started." That night, Josiah could not sleep. He knew the patrol would come, perhaps within days. They had to move again farther, faster, and they had to do it without Gabriel ever suspecting the traitor in their midst. The river whispered still, but now it carried 2 songs, one of hope and one of warning. Josiah could not tell which was louder. The dawn came heavy with mist, wrapping the pines in a ghostly shroud. Josiah's nerves were coiled tight, every sound amplified, the rustle of a squirrel, the drip of dew, the creak of the cabin's boards. He sat near the door, watching Harlan with eyes that never wavered. Lila stirred faintly, her strength returning in fragments. "Is it morning?" she asked, voice thin. "It is," Josiah whispered. "We'll move soon." Gabriel was outside, with Miriam hitching a small cart for supplies. His trust in Harlan stung Josiah like salt in an open wound. Should he tell Gabriel the truth? Or would it split the group apart before the patrol even arrived? The decision was ripped from him before he could choose. A dog's bark shattered the stillness. Then another. And another. Josiah froze. The sound was unmistakable. His hounds trained to hunt flesh. Shouts followed, muffled but closing fast. Patrol. Gabriel hissed as he burst into the cabin. They've found us. The old woman shoved a loaf of bread and a canteen into Miriam's hands. Go. There's a creek behind the cabin. Follow it. North water drowns the dog's scent. Chaos erupted. Miriam grabbed Lila, helping her to her feet. Gabriel snatched an axe from the wall. Josiah's heart pounded, his every instinct screaming fight or flight, and then his eyes met Harlan's. The man stood stiff, pale as chalk, his hand twitching toward his jacket where the pouch of silver bulged. Josiah knew this was no coincidence. The patrol had been led here like hounds to a tethered lamb. Josiah lunged before thought could catch him. He slammed Harlan against the wall, fist driving into his jaw. The man crumpled, coughing blood. You brought them? Josiah roared. Gabriel's eyes widened in shock, but there was no time for questions. The dogs were nearly at the door. Leave him, Gabriel barked. If we stay, we die. The group burst out the back, plunging into the trees. Josiah half-dragged Lila, his legs burning with each stride. Behind them, men's voices cracked through the forest this way. Don't lose him. And the baying of hounds tore at the silence. They reached the creek, stumbling into the cold water. The current bit at their ankles, but Gabriel urged them forward. Stay in the stream. Keep moving. Josiah gritted his teeth, lifting Lila into his arms to keep her from slipping. She clung to him, her breath hot and shallow against his neck. Each step felt like carrying the weight of every changed child he'd left behind. Gunshots split the air. One ball whined past Josiah's ear, splintering a branch. Another struck the water with a hiss. Miriam screamed, but Gabriel yanked her down into the shallows, shielding her with his body. They ran blind through the current until the trees thickened again. The dogs' cries dulled, confused by the rushing water. For a moment, the forest swallowed them in muffled quiet, but Josiah knew it wasn't over. They huddled beneath a fallen oak, gasping for breath. Lila trembled violently in his arms. Gabriel's face was grim, jaw tight. They know we're near. They'll sweep the woods till they find us. Josiah's anger boiled over. 'Cause of him, he spat. Harlan sold us for silver. I heard it with my own ears. Gabriel's eyes burned, but he said nothing. The truth was plain now. We can't go back, Miriam whispered. Not to the cabin, not to the road. What choice is left? Josiah looked north, where the creek disappeared into a tangle of shadowed forest. His body ached, his spirit frayed, but something inside him flared bright as stubborn spark that no lash had ever beaten out. We keep moving, he said, his voice steady. As far as the river takes us, we don't stop till we see the other side. Gabriel studied him, then nodded. Then you lead. The weight of it pressed heavy, but Josiah lifted his chin. For the first time, the choice was his, not overseer. Not master, not traitor. His dogs bayed again in the distance, but Josiah stepped into the stream once more. The current tugged at his legs, urging him forward. He held Lila close, his eyes fixed north. Somewhere beyond the trees, beyond the guns, beyond the dogs, there was freedom. And if the land would not give it willingly, then he would carve it from the earth with his own two hands. The stream narrowed to a twisting ribbon through the forest, its icy water numbing Josiah's legs. Every breath burned, but he forced his body onward, clutching Lila against his chest. Her weight dragged at him, yet he carried her as if she were the very promise of freedom itself. Behind them, the hounds' cries echoed faintly, but for the moment the trees were their shield. Gabriel trudged close, Miriam steadying him as exhaustion bent his shoulders. The little band had become something fragile but unbreakable, held together not by blood, but by the raw will to defy chains. Hours blurred into aching silence. When they finally staggered onto dry land, the forest opened to reveal a vast expanse of marshland shimmering under the afternoon sun. Cypress trees jutted like sentinels, their roots twisting out of black water. Gabriel's voice was hoarse. We're close now. The river's just beyond the swamp. Once we reach it, there are boats that can take us further north. Josiah's chest tightened. The great river, he had heard whispers of it his whole life. For some, it was the end of hope. For others, it was the beginning. They pressed on, slogging through knee-deep muck, swatting at clouds of mosquitoes. Every step was agony. But each one brought the taste of freedom sharper to Josiah's tongue. Then a gunshot cracked the air. Josiah spun, hammering. Across the marsh, figures emerged. 3 patrolmen, rifles raised, dogs straining on leashes. Jonas Pike rode among them, his face twisted in a cruel grin. "There you are," Pike bellowed. "Thought you could outrun me, boy? Thought you could? Steal what belongs to me." The sound of his voice cut Josiah deeper than any lash. For a heartbeat, fear froze him, but then Lila's small hand clutched his neck, her whisper weak but fierce. "Don't stop." "Something inside," Josiah snapped, not with despair but with fire. He set her down gently in the reeds and turned. "To face Pike? No more running?" Josiah said, his voice low but carrying. "Not today." Gabriel stepped forward too, axe in hand, his body trembling but unyielding. Miriam crouched over Lila, shielding her with her own arms. Pike dismounted slowly, savoring the moment. "You ain't nothing but property, boy." "Whip the fight out of you like I always have." Josiah straightened, his scars burning like brands. "Yeah, you whipped my back," he said, "but you never broke me." With a roar, Pike charged, whip unfurling in his hand. Josiah met him head-on, catching the lash as it snapped toward his face. The leather burned his palms, but he yanked hard, dragging Pike off balance. The overseer stumbled, cursing. Josiah surged forward, slamming his fist into Pike's jaw. The man reeled, stunned. Years of rage, humiliation, and pain poured through Josiah's fists as he struck again and again. Thud. Each blow a release of chains. The patrolmen raised their rifles, but Gabriel's axe flashed, forcing them back. One fired, the ball tearing into Gabriel's side, yet he held firm, swinging with a strength born of defiance. The swamp erupted in chaos, dogs snarling, men shouting, water churning. But Josiah saw only Pike beneath him, the man who had ruled his life with cruelty. For a moment, he considered ending its napping, the overseer's throat, silencing him forever. Then Lila's voice carried through the noise, soft but piercing. "Josiah, please." Her plea cut through the red haze. He released Pike, shoving him into the mud. The overseer gasped and sputtered, his power shattered not by death, but by defeat. Gabriel, bleeding but unbowed, shouted, "Go!" to the river. Josiah scooped up Lila, Miriam supporting Gabriel, and together they plunged through the reeds. Behind them, the patrol's shouts grew dim as the swamp swallowed sound. Ahead, the trees parted to reveal it the river, wide and endless, its surface glimmering like a silver road under the setting sun. On the bank, a flatboat waited, tethered loosely, as if left for them by fate. Josiah waded in, lifting Lila aboard. Miriam dragged Gabriel up beside her, pressing rags to his wound with shaking hands. Josiah untied the rope and shoved the boat into the current. The river seized it, carrying them into its wide embrace. On the shore, Pike staggered from the reeds, bloodied and broken, screaming their names. But the river carried them beyond his reach, his figure shrinking until it was nothing but a shadow swallowed by distance. Josiah sat in the stern, holding Lila close as the boat drifted north. The scars on his back ached, but for the first time, they felt like wings. The sun sank low, painting the water in fire and gold. Freedom was not certain, might lie days or years ahead, or it might never come at all. But in that moment, as the river bore them away, Josiah understood freedom was not just a place. It was the act of standing, of resisting, of saying no to chains. And though countless plantation children had never seen freedom, perhaps their voices traveled with him now, rising with the river's song, carrying his name into a future beyond the whip's reach.